Calvin Castine, just a little north of the Elm Street Bridge in Champlain, where Oak Street, Elm Street intersect. It's the 16th day of August 2013, and we're heading inside to the Samuel D. Champlain History Center. We're an exhibit that is part of the town of Champlain's celebration of their 225th anniversary. Tomorrow on the 17th, the town will be celebrating with all kinds of activities, including the Champlain Village having a village fest here that they've had for the past several years. The Champlain Telephone Company is having events, and the town of Champlain, which is the entity that is celebrating the 225th anniversary, will be having all kinds of events that will culminate with a free Gibson Brothers concert at 5 p.m. But throughout the day, there will be an exhibit. The museum here, the History Center, will be open, and there are a couple of new exhibits. Mrs. Lalonde's paintings will be on exhibit, and something of probably broader interest to the people that grew up in and around Champlain, a display of artifacts and history of the Sheridan Ironworks, Sheridan Company, Harris Intertype, Harris Graphics Corporation that closed in 1987 after more than 100 years of providing employment in and around the Champlain Village. So we're going to go inside. We know that Mr. Al Strack, a longtime employee and manager at Sheridan, will be inside to chat with us, and we're going to look around and show you a little bit of the history of what we'll call Sheridan Iron Works, although it went by many, many different names. All right, we've moved inside, and as expected, Al Strack is here, but we also have Mr. Lee Gordon and the proprietor here, Celine Paquette, and I'm going to step in front of you guys because you guys are going to be on camera for the next 3-4 hours in a row here, so you don't mind if we step in front of you right now.
Go ahead.
Celine, this exhibit will be open to the public starting tomorrow as we're recording this on August 17th.
August 17th, Champlain Day. We will be open 9 to 3 tomorrow, but we will have the exhibit here for a few weeks. Yes.
Okay, you say for a few weeks, but when can people stop in and look at it?
They can make an appointment. That's
Okay,
the
by
best way.
appointment?
Yes.
298-1609?
You are correct.
Yeah, 1609 is when Samuel D. Champlain made his way south on that lake that later became known as Lake Champlain. It wasn't Lake Champlain when he first went through there, though.
Well, he named it. That's the only place he named after himself because he found it so beautiful. He did name it.
I don't care what you Native Americans call it. We're now calling it Lake Champlain.
Got it.
So you've also got Mrs. Lalonde's
Yes.
paintings and
Mrs.
artwork.
Lalonde was an artist in Champlain for many, many years. People probably remember her. Her husband had the barber shop next door. She had a place called the Artist Nook, and her daughter has graciously loaned us a lot of her paintings.
She's very, very nice. I've never seen it. I don't think I've ever seen any of her work before, but she was very, very talented.
Very.
Okay. Anything else you want people to know about your History Center before I start concentrating on
No,
these two
we're
gentlemen?
concentrating on these 2 exhibits for Champlain Day and for a few weeks. So we're not having the whole center open, just these 2 main exhibits. And we have these 2 senior gentlemen here with all their Sheridan wisdom ready to share it with you. Thank
Yes,
you.
in fact, it was about a year ago you told me that a fellow named Lee Gordon had donated some stuff
Yes,
to you.
yes,
so
right. So a lot of this is from Lee Gordon and a few others, so, yeah.
Over the years, you
Yeah.
mentioned Roger Nolette when you left the area.
Roger
left some
Nolette,
stuff
John
behind.
Zerlo gave me a few things, Cork Smith, yes.
And the Clark family.
And Lucky Clark has loaned us some, or Robbie Clark has loaned us some photos, yes.
Okay. So I want to thank you for, I think we've already done this, but I want to thank you again here for doing this 225th anniversary thing. A whole lot of things are happening tomorrow, and you and the folks there at the town offices, Jane and Julie primarily, are
They're busy today.
Yeah,
They're
well,
busy.
all the guys, all the guys that worked there were busy too, and they also had some volunteers there helping
Yes,
out.
yes.
So,
It's a big day tomorrow.
yeah,
Big
so
day.
I want to thank you for stepping forward and getting that done, because it would have been a shame not to recognize our 225th anniversary.
Yes. We're also dedicating a marker in front of St. Mary's Church in honor of Noadiah Moore,
Right.
who was the son of Pliny Moore. But Noadiah was very busy with the Underground Railroad, so we want to honor him too.
Yeah, well, I'll be jumping around from one place to another tomorrow.
Good.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Elaine.
we'll see. Thank you.
All righty, here's a couple of guys that I've known for a long time. We'll quickly get into, oh, by the way, I'm holding this here. This is a uniform. You guys probably recognize it's almost Sheridan colors here, not quite. Close.
You never fit in that, did you?
No, I didn't. And in fact, this is actually, my sister-in-law still had this. It wasn't, but she gave it to Judy, my sister-in-law, Brenda Anktil Arno. She wasn't a regular player, so she didn't turn in her uniform when the season got over. So she had it hanging in her closet, and she gave it to Judy. So I imagine when Sheridan closed up, these were just tossed away, went to all the others. So if it weren't for her just not thinking of, oops, got to turn in my uniform, this wouldn't be available right now. So I'm very glad that that she kept that all these years. But Sheridan green, I think, was just a little bit darker than that.
A little bit.
Yeah. Al, when did you first become employed by the Sheridan Company?
1947, I think it was.
It was the year I was born, so that was a good year. Now, 47, was it, I think when I started in 66, it was the Sheridan Company. What was it called when you started, do you recall?
Sheridan Ironworks.
Sheridan Ironworks. Now, even though you reached the top of the ladder there at Sheridan, I have to say that probably when I started, I made more than he did when he started.
Probably, I don't remember.
Because I made 62.40 that first week that I started there, and you probably didn't make 62.40 back in 1947.
Probably not, I don't
Not
remember
the
the
day you
numbers.
started. And Lee, when did your history at Sheridan start?
I started in January of '59.
Okay, now you're an engineer. Were you out of college, or what happened?
Actually, no. I went to Minor Institute when I got out of high school and decided I had to go to work, so I was fortunate enough to get a job at Sheridan Ironworks and worked my way up from trainee draftsman to associate design engineer.
So that was
That
all
was,
on-the-job training then, basically.
And international correspondence school.
I see.
Many years of that.
I
Yes.
see. Okay.
Yeah, ICS.
I don't know if they're still in
So-
existence.
I don't know. They were out of Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So.
But I got quite an education, I'll put it that way. Yeah.
So you worked from 59 up to 87. Did you leave when the plant left?
59. Yes, I left when the plant closed, October 30th of '87.
So that you
I
left.
locked the doors.
So did you stay with the company, or did you?
No, I elected not to because I had too many commitments right up here in the North Country.
Okay.
What I did do was I went subcontracting, consultant work and special engineering work and overseeing installations and
So you
large
still work for them
repairs.
as a freelancer?
I did some work for Harris after. It was AM Multigraphics by then. And I did an awful lot of work for a fellow out of Indianapolis. He was a dealer in machinery, buying and selling and rebuilding and the whole bit. And he kept me rather busy. So it worked out good.
Okay.
After about 15 years of that, 16 years, I finally retired. Yeah,
Okay. So,
it was a lot of travel.
yeah, I can imagine. I know people like Buster Roberts did stuff for Harris, and a lot of local guys ended up running around, going to set up machines and stuff. And,
Been all over the world, actually.
yeah, better you than me. I don't like living out of the suitcase type of deal.
It gets old quick.
Yeah, I imagine so.
Yeah.
Al, what was your first job?
Pattern maker. I went right in the pattern shop, where I
Okay.
stayed for 12, 15 years.
Okay, I think when I got there, Al Glode was in charge of the pattern shop. But for all the folks who have no idea what a pattern shop is, tell us.
Well, pattern shop is related to the foundry, and everything that's molded in the foundry was first made out of wood and appropriately designed to draw out of the flask in the foundry and allow it to be put together with hollowed out areas and the likes of this, forming the casting that was later machined.
Okay, I think we've got an example of that a little bit later here. This little Sheridan block of wood here is kind of
That's a
kind
pattern.
of yeah,
Yeah.
right. So we'll look at that a little bit later. So what they do is they just put what do they call that stuff you put around the pattern?
Oh, actually, they ram sand around it. The sand is treated with a release agent, so you can pull the
Call it mold, or what do they call
the
it?
mold. Yes.
Okay, so then that gives you the imprint of what you're going to try to get in the casting, or what you will get with the casting.
Right.
And
You better get it, or else
Yeah.
you wasted your time.
then you take the pattern out, then you pour your iron ore in there,
Right.
and then you close it up again.
Molds are in two pieces. The pattern normally is in the bottom part called the drag, and the cope, or the second section, is what you pull off and put cores in there if you want cavities or the likes of that. And then you put your cope back on with an appropriate risers and so on to pour the cast iron in.
Okay. We're going to look around here, and before I do, I think what I'd probably like to do is talk a little bit more about what Sheridan did, and then we'll look around, and Judy will be able to move the camera into different spots, but we'll let both of these guys grab a seat. Judy's going to have to stand. I don't know if I've introduced our camera person here, Judy Castine. I worked there from 66 through 75. Judy started there in the early 70s, probably 72, 73. 73, and she worked up right to the bitter end. She was in the parts service department, and they were shipping parts out when just about everybody else was out of there. And so outside the people in personnel, the parts department was probably there as long as anybody. And Al, you stayed with the company, right?
I stayed with the company, went to Dayton until 91 when I retired.
So you were 4 years in
Yeah.
Dayton?
Commuted back and forth, never moved to Dayton, but I commuted back and forth every couple of weeks and maintained my home here.
Yeah, and Grace was still here, so.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, the family stayed here.
right. And, it was just AM International, it was a company that bought Harris, was it Harris Graphics, or Harris, yeah, Harris Graphics at the time.
Yeah, at the time.
And shortly thereafter, they, in their wisdom, decided that this plant was expendable, and it closed, and they made the announcement in 1986, and then a year later, it was history.
Yep.
Okay, let's grab a seat.
Okay.
Okay, Judy says the camera is rolling. Lee, probably without your donation a year or so ago, this exhibit wouldn't be happening right now, even though it's not all your stuff. What kind of things did you collect over the years?
Well, I accumulated, I became the caretaker of a lot of this stuff. Otherwise, it had been thrown out.
Yeah.
And I just stashed it away in the corner somewhere at work. And finally, it come time I had to do something with it. It was either throw it away or find a home for it. So I bought a home and stored it. Then, thank goodness, Celine came along, and I had a place to put it.
Yeah, because it would have been a
So-
shame.
I bought it all down here. The name plates and the serial number plates I got off with machines in the field that were going to be scrapped. Photographs, I had photographs, and my in-laws had photographs, and little things like the service awards, well, they were mine and my father-in-law's, so.
Your father-in-law is?
Henry Boilhard. His father worked at Sheridan, and so didn't he, till he died. And,
Okay, I'm trying to remember. Did he run a press?
he ran the
H-
Bullard vertical turret lathe.
Yeah. Okay. The big in the
Yeah.
1,000 machine shop area. There's
Yeah.
where Bob Emery was foreman later on, and so
Initially, Sandy Phillips had
Yes.
that department.
Sandy was leaving just as I got there.
Yeah.
I knew Sandy because he married a Trudeau girl. A Juneau girl, and Paula was the sister of my uncle Lion Trudeau. So, and plus the Phillips grew up right here in Champlain, across from the church. So I knew Sandy when I got there, and he was just taken sick, and he was just leaving, and then Bob Emery became the foreman shortly thereafter. So,
Yeah.
the planer and boring mill area, I think it was called.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Henry Billard. Okay.
And see what else. Well, most of this literature came from Sheridan.
Mm-hmm.
It's spread out around here.
Yeah, well, we'll take a look, we'll relocate. So it's a collection that you did for a number of years, and like you said, having a father-in-law in the business too, there was other things that you...
Sure.
Just by osmosis, you captured. One of the first jobs I had in '66, I was working in the dispatch office with Joel McRae, and of course he had shut down end of July. And just starting in May, obviously didn't have any vacation, so I was offered the job of helping out in the finished part storage and just helping scrap stuff. And you'd not mentioned nameplates. In that 2-week period, one of the main things we scrapped was old nameplates that probably hadn't been used in 50 years. And now I look back and I say, oh my gosh, I wish they hadn't gone to the landfill, and we could have saved some of those. And a few years back, I'd asked the guys up at Prim Hall, I said, you ever get any nameplates off those machines? Let me know. I'd like to save those and bring them back to town. But I know they had Sheridan machines in there, but I never got any nameplates from any of those guys.
I had customers actually mail me nameplates
Did
off
you?
their machines that they were scrapping.
Wow.
Yeah. Kind of neat.
Yeah, I did buy a couple of nameplates. I'll grab this one right here. I've got two that I bought on eBay. They're a little bit smaller than this. I'd say probably 60% of this size. And they're numbered. One says 35 and one says 38. So they had a serial number on them, an awfully low serial number.
Every new machine that went out of the plant had to have a serial number attached to it.
So this nameplate here probably wasn't used because there's no...
There's no number on it,
Yeah.
But every machine had a serial number plate for obvious reasons to keep track of the machine.
Right. Yeah. So somebody called up and said, my machine so-and-so, okay, what's the serial number on there? And so, but a number, it didn't have one of these long numbers. It had both of these plates have just two numbers, 35 and 38.
That's possible, yeah.
So I don't know if these were the 35th and 38th machines that the company made or what the situation was. I don't know how they came up to determine what the number on the machine was.
Each group of machinery had its own serial numbers allotted.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd go numerically. The next number became the next serial number and so forth.
Yeah, but later on, they had, like, HT would start with an HT trimmer would start with HT.
Right.
The binder might start with CB.
The earlier machines, they just had a number.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Al, Lisa, his father-in-law worked there. I think Celine's got the picture here. Now, as far as just Strack's, you worked there, your brother Phil worked there, any other of your...
Nope, that's the only ones in
Of
my
your siblings.
immediate family. I had a brother Paul work there for a little while, but he didn't stick around.
Betty, your daughter, worked there for a while, didn't
Yeah, Betty worked there, and my son worked
Kevin
there.
worked there probably after I
Kevin.
left in 70.
Yeah.
I graduated. I mean, I left in 75. I didn't graduate there, so I left in 75. But he probably just getting out of school around that time or so, and he probably came
Somewhere
after
around
I
that
left.
time.
Yeah. So he probably came.
Don't
after I
ask me
left.
for too many dates.
But over on the wife's side of the family, the Coulomb name was well represented.
Yes, very well. There's a picture around here somewhere
Celine took it, I think,
that
with her.
shows a whole generation of Coulombs that worked there, including their father and maybe their grandfather. I never knew the grandfather. He's in the picture, so I assume he worked there. But Ledger Coulomb I knew, and I knew, of course, all the Coulomb boys, all except one, which is Freddie, and not Freddie, but Pete, who went down the orchard and worked. All the rest of the boys in the family worked at Harris Graphics or Sheridan.
So that was Joe Coulomb's siblings.
Siblings, yes.
Okay.
They worked at different places in the shop. Some in the machine shop, some in the assembly, some in the foundry.
So that was your father-in-law and all
All his brothers.
all your wife's brother,
Yeah.
uncles, all your wife's uncles.
Yep,
Then your brother-in-law, Duke Lester Coulomb, worked there. That was
Yes.
Joe's son. And
his son.
yeah, and I
So-
know other generations. Like I remember Gerald Coulomb worked there. His father
Oh, yes,
worked
yeah.
there, and so there were several generations. Kind of like the Junos. I know there was a lot of Junos working
A
there.
lot of Junos, a lot of Grigware family.
And the foundry at Gregware's were just.
The whole place really was a family-oriented place. You could almost figure that once the boys got out of high school, or if they didn't want to go on to further education, they'd get a job at the shop.
Well, what you found was, if you know the Junos or the Coulombs or whoever, the Gregwares were good workers, you kind of felt safe hiring another one because
Right.
you knew that the ethic that family brought to the.
Right. And very often, the older member of the family saw to it that the boys did their work.
Did your father-in-law ever get after you to get busy?
No, of course, my work was a little different than his, but, yeah, he instilled good work ethics in me, yeah.
Okay, now, Al, did you grow up here? I know, Lee, you're from Moores,
Yeah.
the Gordon farm
I
there.
lived in Champlain for 12 years, I guess, after I got married.
But you grew up in Moores, and
We moved back to Moore's, yeah.
and then right in that Gordon farm, right, where the, no?
Yeah, the farm is still there.
Yeah, right, and that's diagonal from the funeral home there, right?
Across the river from the dam, you know where the dam is, just over the cross in the field there.
Where Bruce Supernaw is, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my brother-in-law.
Yeah, right, yeah, so that's diagonal from the funeral
Okay.
home.
Oh, there's two
Hamilton, the
funeral.
Hamilton funeral home.
There's two funeral homes.
The Hamilton.
One thing to the other.
Hamilton,
You're right.
okay, all right. And Al, you grew up in Champlain, or what?
No.
No?
I'm a Rouse's Pointer. I grew up in Rouse's Point, graduated the high school in Rouse's Point, then went in the service, and I became a Champlainer when I came here to work. When I came back from the service, I worked a year or so construction because I wanted to work outdoors. I thought that was a great life till I worked one winter. Then I realized that wasn't all that much fun. So, married a Champlain girl, moved to Champlain, got a job at the shop.
And you started, did you tell us what you did when you started?
I first started in the pattern shop,
Pattern shop, right.
which is a woodworking shop making all type of forms and so on.
Now, you worked your way up through the ranks. How did you do that?
Mostly like Lee through self-education, ICS. I took and completed a machine design course. And after completing the machine design course, I talked to the engineering manager and with looking for some advice as to how to go on, and he told me I'd end up being probably a senior draftsman. I didn't think that was good enough, so I took industrial engineering instead and ended up with a better position than I thought I would get if I stayed in the engineering field alone.
Okay, and were you ever the plant manager down here?
Yeah, oh yeah, I was plant manager, plant superintendent, plant engineer. That's a reverse. I actually started as plant engineer, worked plant superintendent and plant manager.
Plant
Yeah.
manager. And of course, when I started there, he came up here in the 1930s, and he'd, I think, on the machine shop, and not, excuse me, on the assembly floor, I think, was where Jack Zerlo started, right? Didn't he start working in that area, not as an assemblyman, but didn't Jack Zerlo start in the assembly department?
He came up from New York, Brooklyn, well, I'm not sure what part of New York, and started managing the assembly floor. Then he took over the whole plant for many, many years. The plant centered around him.
Yeah, and one of the things we hope not to hear while we're sitting here is the fire alarm from the fire station just down the road. But back when Sheridan was running at full tilt, that fire alarm went off. You had dozens of firemen that were right there, right in the village, ready to go out on call.
We had extremely good relations with all the people there, and when it came to being committed to the village and the community, Sheridan was right there and did everything they could to promote the village, to promote the community, and to satisfy emergency needs such as fire and the likes of this. So whenever anything happened, they could always count on coming up to Sheridan for some help.
And I'm sure the same situation existed with Arist and Rouse's Point, where you had the managers of these companies lived in the community. They weren't living 30 miles away. They lived in the community. So they felt this was their community, their home, and they were part of it. It isn't always that way now in the corporate world.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a whole different.
Times have changed.
Yes. We've talked about Sheridan. I don't think we've ever got to the point where we really specifically said, we mentioned a few machines. But it started out as a foundry. I don't know, are any of you guys semi-experts on the history of the founding of this company?
Well, I know the fact that it started out to be a stove manufacturing company because we used to find a lot of the patterns, and it gradually got into machine shop. I think that there was a banker here that had some financial dealings with the company, and he promoted the operation down in New York City and got them to come up here on a contract basis, building some machinery, and then it grew from there.
For a few years, several years, the Clark family owned it, then the Sheridan family got involved, and the Clark family was still involved, and
Right, it used to be TB and CB Sheridan, and Clark family owned the larger portion of the shares.
I think initially there was Kellogg and Averill that had a blacksmith foundry. Then the Sheridan people got involved, and then from the Sheridan people, the Clarks got involved. And
I think through marriage or something.
one of the Clarks married a Sheridan
Yeah.
girl. I don't know which
I don't know
one.
the details of that.
That's how the Clarks got into this. Yeah.
yeah, I think that there were, in addition to stoves, but they were doing farm implements, plows and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
sure.
Which is, in the 1840s and 50s, that's,
There was a
What you
demand
needed,
for
right.
it, sure.
but then they became a book binding outfit. And as an engineer, we had presses and binders and
Yeah, we had complete lines, complete bookbinding lines that would take the paper from the presses and collate the signatures into book form and put covers on and so forth and so on. Then trimmers that would trim these books. And then we had hardcover machinery, book smashers, embossing presses for the covers, case makers to make covers, roundabacker liners that would prepare the book blocks, and casing machines that put these hard covers on the book. And then there was newspaper machinery became a big item. All kind of machinery for newspaper production. Also, a line of mechanical presses for literally everything from cutting puzzles to forming car hoods and fenders for General Motors and Ford Motor Company and the likes of those guys.
Well, that was probably early on, not so much in the 70s and 80s, obviously.
No.
Yeah.
Later came the high-speed electronics control equipment. And we had bookbinding lines for magazine work that would run 300 copies per minute. And a lot of paper flying around. And all computerized, it would inkjet your name on your copy of your book, and it would get wrapped and it'd get sent to Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3 for areas of the company,
Okay.
country.
Now,
And
did you have an expertise, Lee? Type of machine, the binders more than the presses, or?
bindery lines and the edition book lines were my specialty. But
Now, how would that
I,
how would that happen? Somebody would come up with the idea that this is what we need to do, because what you made in 1950, you're not going to make in 1970. So, how did that machine?
it was an ongoing evolution
evolution.
that developed machinery for the current needs of the customer,
So you'd
the
adapt.
manufacturer. Yeah.
This worked. Maybe if we did this, we could do this.
Speed became a big factor involved in the design. And then we had to control that speed. That's where the electronics came from. You couldn't have one without the other.
Otherwise,
So-
stuff would be flying all over the place.
So it kind of built on itself like that, right up to present day.
So once you passed that ICS course, you didn't sit back and say, I'm done. I've learned all I need to know. It was ongoing.
No, very early on, I was assigned to the bindery group. And that's where I worked in engineering.
Yeah, but as these things were developed, you have to help design them, help,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So-
that
and
did a
it's-
lot of prototype work, and then I'd take it out in the field and field test it and give it a clean bill of health or scrap it or start over or whatever. And I got involved with all phases. There was a period of time I worked in quality control. In quality control, I was responsible for checking out every machine that went out the door. So I got to know all the later day machines, and that helped me tremendously when I went subcontract, and I could work on most anything.
Now, we had a little thing called an ECN,
Engineering change notices, yeah.
and it seemed that no machine, when you ordered it, it came into the production control office there, and people went through the book. People like Albert Badger and Phil Strack went through that book and ordered all the castings and all the parts that were needed for it. From that stage till it went out the door, no machine ever went out exactly like it first looked like.
Not clean, no. It had a lot
Because,
of,
particularly, I think you'd get it down to floor, and that the guy in the assembly floor, a Joe Coulomb, would say, hey, Lee Gordon, this here isn't going to quite work. What are we going to do to make sure this gets out the door?
not all our machines were assembly line type machines. They were custom machines, made to the customer specs. So consequently, there were a lot of changes. before a machine got out the door. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Al, you were mainly involved in the production end, right? More than
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. so-
Definitely.
And those guys in the machine shop, and when I'm thinking particularly on the assembly floor, these guys knew those machines and really helped people like Lee to get that.
Yeah,
That design.
the machine, the principle of bookbinding didn't change too much over the years. Once it was developed by Alfred Greenberg, it pretty well stayed the same. The method of doing it changed from time to time, sometime on customer demand, sometime on just plain good engineering. And it was a constant, I won't say battle, it was a constant effort on the part of assemblers and so on to keep up with the newer methods that the engineering department developed.
Because the machine they built 2 years ago, even though it might be the same machine, it's different this year.
It still did the gluing of the backs and the likes of this, but there were techniques in each one of the steps that might change a little bit.
Now, some of these assembly bosses down there, what were they called?
Assembly chiefs, most of them.
Yeah, chiefs.
They're pretty powerful people.
Yeah. And what, we'll
We listened to them.
and some of them, were French, and us Frenchmen are known to having hard heads. And I imagine once in a while, Lee, you bucked heads with some of these assembly chiefs.
I had a good working relationship with
nice,
all
great-
those guys.
Great guy like you,
but,
but yeah.
I'd listen to them.
Oh, yeah.
You got to
These guys-
listen
yeah,
to them
these
because
guys-
more often than not, they had good, valid points,
Right.
So,
Well, it looks good on paper. It doesn't necessarily,
that's right.
look at here on paper. It's supposed to work.
That's right.
Final success of any one of the machines is really credited to the people assembling it.
Right.
And making sure that everything functioned the way it was supposed to. That was truly the most important group for a machine's success, were the assemblers. Now, everybody's job was important. Don't let me understate that. But
But the final,
but the
buck stops
final
here type of deal.
testing and making it all come to successful completion was the assemblers.
Yeah, and a lot of times, a part would be machined exactly like it should have been, but they'd get it down to the assembly floor, and whoops, it doesn't quite work the way it should. So you'd come back, and hopefully it didn't involve a casting, because then you'd be up the creek. But as long as it involved steel or something like that,
Right.
there you could rework, a new one and get the piece that they
Right.
needed.
And the engineers worked well with most of our assemblers. They went down there and tested their own designs and the likes of this. It was a very close-knit group, both the engineer and the assembler.
Yeah, and when you look at those assembly chiefs as a group, they were just a colorful bunch in many cases. I remember particularly Alex Shania with that skinny little finger of his, and he couldn't talk to you without poking you in the chest.
Well, in the earlier years, the assembly chiefs had enough clout that they would even go up through the machine shop and say, I want this piece and I want that piece and the likes of this. But as we got a little more sophisticated in all our methods, we took control of that, and the foreman in the machine shop pretty well controlled all the production flow, getting the parts to finished stores and then to assembly on a prescribed schedule.
Well, then you'd have people like myself and like later on Judy, expediters, whose
Yep.
job it was to go down there, catch heck from the guy in the assembly floor, because I need this, and then go up and beg the foreman, I know this other expediter wants this, this other guy wants this, when can you do this? And
Well, many of these machines contain 2,000 or 3,000 parts, different parts.
Right.
So to get everything scheduled and on the floor at the proper time was a very, very good task.
yeah, because you had so many different
Right.
machines going through the
So
machine
there-
shop at the same time.
And there was bound to be mistakes, both in processing the list and getting them to the floor and et cetera. So those all came to fruition when the machine was completed.
And
We just-
then you had the repair department.
Yep.
And everything in the repair department was needed yesterday. If in most cases, once in a while you'd have something that ordered a couple months ahead, but
I think at one time, didn't we have something like 50,000 active parts?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, we had a tremendous amount of active parts. Each machine required 2,000 to 3,000 components, but when you put all our machines together, there was a whole lot of parts in finished stores. And inventory was always a problem. It was a financial problem and a scheduling problem. So having the right parts was the key.
yeah.
when we had our, when we had our own foundry,
Yeah.
that was a big plus
Oh,
for us.
definitely.
But when government regulations and so forth came in, we had to do away with the foundry and source them from contractors that were in the foundry business. And at that point, we took a lot of those castings and made weldments out of them, or went to steel weldments. So we had some control of parts, but
So it's a lot more machining to make what could have been molded as a casting, where you just need to trim a little bit here, a little bit there, and there you got the part.
yeah,
Starting
and
with-
if you messed up a weldment, you could fix it
Yeah.
rather easy. So that helped.
But yeah, so
Yeah,
the foundry
it was,
probably closed, what, in the early 70s, Al? Or-
60, something like 67, 68.
That soon. I started in 66. I thought it ran for a few years after.
Well,
Or maybe not.
I can't be sure of the date. I had left the pattern shop by then,
Yeah, yeah.
and
I think it was late 60s.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Was the foundry running when you started there in 60? Not in 73, obviously not. But, okay.
That closed shortly after they moved engineering to Eastern Pennsylvania in 67. So it was either 68 or 69, I
it
think.
was somewhere in there.
Now, they kept a handful of engineers. Did you move?
No, I stayed up here as, in a liaison capacity between engineering and manufacturing. I think there's 5 or 6 of us that stayed up here.
Dick Lawrence?
Dick Lauren, Myron Dagenhart, Lester Coopy way back when.
And
Those guys come to mind.
players to be named later. Al, remember? Can you help us?
What was the question?
The engineers that didn't move down to Easton, like Lee.
Then moved to Easton?
Yeah.
No, I think you've named the main ones.
We apologize to anybody out there that we can't think of, but
That didn't always work as smoothly as they thought it would work. But,
well, yeah, well, what helped,
sometimes the problems were more than we could handle.
what helped was that new invention called the fax machine. And you'd get this thing that took, what, an hour to get a print faxed up here at that time? I know particularly the guys in the repair department, Cliff Overy sitting there and waiting. Is this?
Yeah, that was slow going. Compared to communications of today, that was very slow.
Yeah, but it was better than waiting for 2-3 days for the mail or
Right.
overnight delivery or whatever.
I remember our first computer. Man, we thought that was the greatest thing ever. We were going to have this computer to do our church functions and so forth and so on. That thing was the size of a refrigerator, and the screen was 4x4. What an invention that was.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there was IBM computer type of things in the IBM office, I guess they call it, where Medard Coupel was, and
Yeah.
Lucien Duquette. And,
IBM was the first computer that we had. They came in here and offered us consulting capabilities and the likes of this, which really didn't turn out well. We had to hire a consultant to help us install the computer because we had to change over so much, particularly in the production control and ordering areas. But we came out way ahead. We had some good computer people, I'll tell you. They may not have all the degrees that some of them do, but I've been other places, and Champlain was well ahead of a lot of them.
Well, because it was the ground floor.
Yeah.
This was the beginning of that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Every one of these 50,000 active parts had what we call the Cardex card,
Yep.
and it was filed in a Cardex file, if you can imagine that. You'd post when you ordered a part, and you post when it came in, and you always had the balance on hand. But if, God forbid, if you misfile one of those cards,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're all numerical, CB,
yeah,
whatever.
it's just like blueprints. Misfile one of those, and sometimes that would become a disaster.
Why, yeah.
Trying to find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thousands of blueprints, and if it's not where it
So
should
the
be.
computer helped eliminate a lot of this Cardex business and missing blueprints, and yeah.
Yeah, because you didn't have extra copies. Now, did they keep master blueprints in Easton of everything, or?
Yeah, all the originals were in Easton during that period, and we had transparencies of everything.
Yeah. So, well, we needed to go up to that blueprint office and plop out a blueprint. I remember when I first started, my first top boss was Alan Hugaboom, and Larry Jarvis was my immediate supervisor. You remember who your top boss was? Outside of the plant manager, of course. But
First guy I worked for was George Cameron,
and you survived.
and I survived. Yeah, he was a good craftsman, but a little different person.
Would you word cantankerous? George was a good friend, but boy, I wouldn't have wanted to work for him.
I made out all right.
Yeah,
He then took over the foundry,
yeah.
and I took over the pattern shop from him.
Yeah.
And eventually I became his boss.
And the foundry closed, he moved into the, I don't know if you call it ordering department, I know
Yeah,
it's called purchasing.
He purchased castings
Yeah,
once the foundry.
he and Mike Gregoire were in
Yeah.
there, and, yeah. So, but George was, you had to know George, and sometimes he'd do things just because he enjoyed doing things, just
Yeah.
to get a rise out of somebody.
He loved your reaction to
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
he'd just do something just for the sake of, so you never knew if he was really digging you or if he was just pulling your leg that time. But all in all, he worked the youth commission here. He did a whole lot for the town and community of
He's a
Champlain.
good person, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So he was your immediate supervisor. So
He was my immediate supervisor.
and Lee.
I had,
Goopy, was it,
I
or
had,
who-
I
who
had
was
several supervisors.
Who was the?
I guess Paul Chamberlain was my
Okay.
first supervisor.
I went to school, graduated with his son Steve.
Paul L. Lewis, Marcel Gagne, and then later it was Lester Coopy, Richard Lauren. Yeah,
I think when I started there, we lost Ron Roberts about a year ago there. I think he was in the engineering department, and did he leave when they moved to Easton? Did he not go to Easton? Is that why Ron left the?
yeah. When they moved engineering to Easton, they didn't need everybody, so Ron was cut along with a few others.
Well, he did all right for himself after that,
Yeah.
becoming the owner of Riley Ford. But he must have been probably around your time in school.
Yes, actually, we graduated from high school together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He was known as Picky. What were you known as?
I'd rather not say.
Okay, he'll tell us off camera. You were known as Red.
I was known as Red. Couldn't tell now, but
AKA Red, now
yeah.
White. But that happens to most of us here, except for Lee. He,
Yeah, it's just up and left me.
Okay, I want to look around. Anything else that I should be asking you guys before we look at some of this display? That you said, oh boy, I want to make sure I mention this. You knew you were coming here today?
Nothing that I can think of. I'm sure all the retirees that are around have all kind of own experiences that they would like to share, but because there was an awful lot of great times, a lot of hard work, and it was these people that made it. And I didn't realize just how important that was until I went to Dayton,
Yes.
which was a completely different organization. Yeah.
Yeah, when you're working together for a purpose instead of working against each other, it's it's a lot better. Yeah?
Even though we had a few misunderstandings with the union once in a while, it was still a very family-oriented, and everybody was dedicated to their job. I would be wrong if I said anything different.
Okay, maybe I can. That camera zooms in real fast, so it's going to be a challenge to Judy. But I'm going to hold up this here. This is one of the things I bought off eBay, in addition to those nameplates and a couple of other items. This is a union patch from the International Association of Machinists. What was it, 1065? Does that sound, remember what the number was?
No, I don't. I belonged for a few years before I moved into management, but I don't remember the number.
1060, no, it can't be 1066. That was the Battle of Hastings. So.
But there were.
It might be, maybe in some of the literature here, we'll find out. I'm guessing, you guys want to have a lottery here? We'll see who comes the closest. I'm going 1065.
That sounds good to me.
Okay.
I wouldn't argue that.
Okay. So anything else, Lee, Al, that we wanted before we stand up and look around? You can obviously, you're going to add stuff once we start looking around, but anything else right now?
I think we covered a lot.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think so.
All right. Judy will shut the camera off and we'll relocate.
Bye, Judy.
Okay, we have a couple of tables here. Judy's pointing at, there's one with, looks like, I think that's from the Champlain 2000 book, that page on the left there. John Zerlo put together a 4-page history of Sheridan back in, actually it was 2002, but it's a book we put out to commemorate, it was supposed to be 2000, it just took so long to get it done. So that looks like one of the pages from there. It shows some of the old-timers clubs and the softball team, the men's softball team that they had. And it looks like a dinner there. I see Dick Purcell on the end. And I see underneath there a Harris Intertype Corporation nameplate. Now at Harris Intertype, 64, I think?
About 64.
Yeah,
They
sounds right.
bought into Sheridan, yeah.
And probably within 5 years or so, they became Harris Graphics, or do you recall roughly? Roughly?
It became just plain Harris after Harris Intertype. I think there were 7 divisions in Harris.
Yeah, I
And
think,
then after Harris, it became Harris Graphics.
Yeah. Harris was an electronic company. They're still in existence down in Melbourne, Florida. And they wanted to go all electronics rather than the printed word. They used to consider themselves a communication corporation, but they went all electronic communication. And the Harris Corporation spun off of them, and they were press people, bindery people, and the likes of that.
okay, now, they bought Sheridan, which was, did they have a similar company that they were already doing?
Sheridan,
Were they a competitor?
Sheridan was part of them.
Yeah,
Harris
Yeah.
Intertype built presses.
so they were a competitor to us at one point?
Not
We
really.
were Sheridan and they were Harris Intertype? No?
Not really. We didn't have printing presses back then.
Oh, okay.
Our only competition was really foreign competition.
Mueller,
Mueller and then the likes of that,
out of
yeah.
Germany.
out of Germany, yeah.
Was there a Japanese company too? I can't remember that. I know
There was a Japanese product, but they never were very successful. They tried to make a binder, and we even took it over here and tried to do something with it, and didn't do it very well at all.
Wouldn't fly,
No,
wouldn't
just-
make books.
So, and the Easton plant operated up until probably early 70s.
78, I think they moved everything up to Champlain.
Oh, they were doing it before that because it was happening. Joe Miller came up out of there, and Smith came up out of there, and some of those guys when I was still there, and I left in
Yeah,
'75.
you're right, you're right. The
And
machine
so there were
shop,
some stitchers and things that they were
machine
doing.
shop closed in early 70s. And about 78, they moved everything else up to Champlain,
Yeah. So
which was mainly offices and engineering.
we went from moving all of our engineers, almost all.
Yeah.
To
We
Easton.
kept the best ones here, but all our engineers down to Easton. To a few years later, they ended up closing their machine shop down there.
Right, that's when we started doing a lot of our building up here, built a new engineering department, new administrative offices, and so on.
They put up a couple of large buildings.
Yes,
there,
yes.
Just to house some machines and stuff.
Right. Then we moved all the bindery equipment up here. So there's two types of binding, saddle binding and perfect binding. One is a hardback, glued back, the other is a stapled, like some of the magazines.
Right.
They were doing most of the saddle work down in Easton.
Yeah. A
And we
comic
were-
book would be an example of a staple.
Yes.
Just a magazine with without the binding.
Newsweek, Times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the ones with the fold and open up into a fold.
Then it was all brought up here. And a little bit of it went to Slough, where they made the hoppers for the saddle machines.
That was England.
Yes.
Now, I know Al Lewis worked over there in Slough for a while before he came back here.
Yeah, that was after they closed, after they moved engineering to Easton, I think.
I think he went to Slough, then he came
Yeah.
back here and moved into the
Machine
production
shop,
office.
production, yeah.
Yeah. So Al Lewis, a local boy, and
Right.
the day we buried Father Delbell here locally, they had a service for Wilma Conover, who was Al Lewis's sister. And I know the family well because they were, Wilma went to school with my father. So we got a newspaper article, we've got a sign, TW and CB Sheridan sign. You've got a brown covered little booklet there that samples the machines that a salesman would have used, or who would have used that, Lee?
Sales, mainly sales.
Okay, just to have something to talk about when he went to
Yeah,
call on somebody.
Yeah, something to look at, talk
Yeah.
about.
There's a program for a Sheridan Harris Graphics reunion. That must have been an old timers dinner probably from 1987. It looks like from here that the date good.
It was probably the last one, old timers dinner,
Probably so.
last supper, yeah.
Okay, and a few in-house publications. It looks like on that table. Then we're gonna let Judy turn the camera over, and this looks like a display of something that Celine probably put together. It's nothing that either of you guys had, right? This large table here, this large,
I don't know who put that together, but that's the last old timers dinner at the bottom left there.
okay. And what that was everybody, all the retirees who had worked there at least 25 years, and the current employees who
Yeah.
had been there 25 years.
Right.
I'm sorry, it's the one in the center's
Okay.
the last old timers dinner.
And a lot of those are at the Anchorage, and we've seen some pictures here today of the Midway Restaurant, which used to be on Route 9, when it was once owned and partially owned and operated by my uncle Orville Trombley and his family. What other places would you probably went to a few of these, Al?
Yeah, I went to quite a few of them.
You were,
The early ones I didn't go to because I didn't have the
well,
25
obviously-
years in yet.
Obviously, in 1954, you weren't going to the old timers.
Right. But
Were most of them at the anchorage?
most of them that I went to, I can remember them starting out at the Midway. And, but most of them went back to Anchorage. Then it got so big, we had to go down to Plattsburgh to the Howard Johnson. Because even the Anchorage got too small.
And Lee, you didn't quite make it to the Old Timers Club, or did you make it?
Oh, I made it, yeah.
Did you? How did you make it? Let's see, 25 years, 62, yeah, you made it by about 3 times then, right?
Yeah, 3 times, I guess. Yeah. They waited for me.
Okay, so there's some different, there's an old picture of the when the foundry was operating, and,
Yeah, that isn't the foundry, that's actually the front office,
right,
looking at it from the railroad
the
siding.
water tower in the back.
Right. There was a
Now-
railroad siding went down between that building and the main machine shop at the time, and we used to bring our coal down there for the boiler and dump it way in the back, down by the water tower.
Now, even though the tracks were gone when I started in '66, because the Rutland's last cars left here in '62, and they hadn't operated for about a year when they did close up. It was still known as the other side of the tracks.
Yes.
Across the tracks when you went from the office to the machine shop.
Yes, it was, because you had to go outdoors. There was no, it wasn't enclosed.
Not at first.
Not at
Eventually
first.
it did.
And
Yeah.
there was a red light in the door and a bell that would ring if the train was in there or coming in.
Oh, so back in the days when the train was
Alerts
active,
you to the fact that maybe the train's coming.
you wouldn't want to
Look,
step
yeah.
out there and and see the train go whizzing by. I don't imagine it went too fast, but even if it's going 20 miles an hour, it's faster than I want to get hit by a train. So did you ever get any surprises, Al, when you opened up that door?
Not that I recall. I never stepped in front of the train. Obviously, I'm still here.
Yeah. But they pick up. Now, did they had a little spur that they would stop and pick up a car if we had something to ship out?
We seldom shipped from that point. We had a loading dock on the far side of that office building at the end of the machine shop. They used to ship presses out of there. And that's a little bit before my time, because they had another spur coming into the building from the east that we could pick up a press or a binder and put it right on a railroad car. But in the earlier days, they used to ship presses out that and manhandle it into a railroad car. That little, as I say, it's a little before my time.
So did they sometimes, if they were doing something, did they make deliveries right there? If something came up by train, would they stop and?
I assume they might have, but I don't recall.
So you didn't have to
what
worry
product
too much
was.
about the train being parked there when you were trying to get across
No, no,
from the
no,
office
no.
to the?
No, the train just strictly brought coal in.
Brings,
and coal.
brings to mind that track that came in that lower bay was also to load what we call sheet stretchers. They were good-sized machines built back during the war days.
Right.
For
And I know in that Champlain 2000 book, there's a picture of a sheet stretcher. Oh, there's just one right over there. Is that a sheet stretcher over there?
that's part of one.
That's a component, yeah.
Yeah, that's a component.
Yeah, okay, we'll be looking at that shortly
That
then.
was before my time.
Probably during the wars, even before Al Strack's time.
It was, but I'll have to correct Lee.
Uh-oh, come on up and,
The sheet stretcher was built after the war because I was in the pattern shop and made the patterns for it.
Okay.
so take
There
that,
was a
Leroy.
company in California, Sheridan Gray,
Sheridan Gray took it over.
took it over.
We only made a few of them.
Oh, we were Sheridan Green and they were Sheridan Gray?
Sheridan Gray, yeah.
That machine was so big that the jaws themselves were 18 feet long, and we had to dig a pit in the floor in order to accommodate the depth of the machine.
Wow.
Some pretty sophisticated hydraulics.
Now, I talk about Sheridan Green and I don't see anything here that is Sheridan Green.
Sheridan Green didn't last very long. It didn't last very long. They went to a lighter color because they were too hard to maintain in the field.
That-
Yeah. It's like having a black car. Looks great when it's clean.
Yeah, it was a lousy color.
Well, it was unique. It's kind of very similar, maybe just a shade or two darker than Minor Farm Green.
Yeah.
Minor had a green, and
Yeah.
I've got a building at my place that's painted Minor Farm Green, and I'm going to try to keep that paint on there as long as I can. Okay, let's move up here. Judy can move over to the switchboard. Is this, I assume, is an actual switchboard? Come on over here, Lee. Or Lee wants to, come on over this way.
Did you ever run a switchboard?
Is that the switchboard out of
Betty and
Harris,
Wolfie.
Sheridan?
I don't know. That's what I'm assuming. Let's see what it says here.
Very similar to it.
Operator's switchboard circa 1961, donated by Champlain Telephone Company, so it's might be a phone company switchboard that would have been similar to what they would have used there.
We had one similar.
And there's some files up there, not quite Cardex files, but they're still files.
Yeah, still index
And
files.
whoever it is drinking a Pepsi. See, there's an old can of Pepsi, probably circa 1961 also. All right, well, let Judy relocate that camera, and we'll try to get some of this other stuff over here. Most of this little table right here is kind of glowed out, glared out for us as far as viewing on the camera, but there's a Harris Graphics pen set.
That was made when we had an open house and we had our first computer control machine there, and we were making it to demonstrate to the public how flexible the machine was. We actually, that name is actually,
That little tag is covering up the machining work.
Oh, okay. I don't know if
There's
can you zoom in? There we go. Okay, you see the,
Yeah.
that's machine on, that's not a casting.
No, that's
on.
machine on there.
Now, is that numerically controlled, an NC machine?
Yeah.
numerically controlled machine.
Mazak, big
That was
Mazak.
one of our first numerically controlled machines.
Yeah, I think when I started in '66, there was an NC drill at the time, and that was probably the first numerical control. And, numerical control means they just punch it in.
That was the old two-type control made by Heald Company in Worcester, Mass. That was actually our first machine. This was a milling machine that had the capability of cutting that. The drill, the Heald drill, only did point-to-point drilling,
So it's all programmed in there, and then
all programmed in there.
you just put your piece of metal in there, and then in the case of that drill, it would drill, and it'd actually move the part around to correspond, and so the operator just had to set it up and sit back.
Yeah. Let me make one comment.
Sure.
John Zero Sr.
Yeah.
Developed a spacing table. He was way ahead of his time, really. A lot of people were laying out, when you had to drill, you'd lay it out manually
Uh-huh.
and punch it and then drill in those spots. He designed a table that would fit underneath a radial drill that by crank would move the table against a veneer scale, so you know exactly where you were, and the whole piece could be drilled from that table. The heel drill that we bought was nothing more than computerized spacing table, and that you could have sworn that it was his table under a numerical control. And he also felt that way.
So he was looking for his part of the
Sure.
part of the credit and the cash, probably.
But he did a great job of designing that,
Did he
like I
patent
say,
it?
ahead of his
Did he
time.
patent it, or did he just?
He
use-
patented it, yeah, but without the controls and so.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a Harris graphic, a little tag like how you'd wear on your uniform or your shirt, little Harris graphics. You got one in your hand too, Al?
Yeah, well, I picked it up from here.
Oh, okay. Well, good thing I caught that. Celine
Yeah.
said, "Where's that tag?" Okay, I don't know if you can see anything in that next group there. I know the pictures we can't see, but I don't know if Judy can see in that next little table here. There's some, what are those, the stocks? Those look like stocks, or what?
I think those are
Patented?
patents.
Did you zoom in enough, Judy?
Yes.
Yeah,
Celine said she had
yeah,
the original patents, and I think those are it.
Okay, so those are patents for some Sheridan machines. Then there's some more nameplates and a few more booklets. And again, this display will be here up through November. So if people watching in 2013, you're still a chance to see it. If you're watching this before November, just call 298-1609. And 1609 is the year that Samuel D. Champlain came through. So that's how you can remember that number. And they'll tell you when somebody will be here, and you can come in and take a look at this stuff yourself. About how much of this is from you, Lee? Altogether, what we see just looking around the room.
Sheridan on
About half the stuff we're looking at today?
casting. A good share of
A
it.
good share of it?
Yeah.
Al, you must have a few items that,
Actually not, I was
Really?
never a
not a collector?
collector,
No?
so I didn't take anything with me.
Well, I know there was a nice picture hanging over your I think it was that one that Chris blew up of that aerial view of Sheridan back
Of the shop, yeah.
in the early 60s or so.
Well, Chris is more of a collector than I am.
That's a nice view. Maybe when I get back home, I've got a nice shot of that. I'll show it as part of this. There's a little print down there. What is that? That doesn't look like a blueprint down there. Right below that red Sheridan sign there, Judy, there's a little print down there of some sort. What is? Any idea what that is? It looks like a design for an office as much as anything.
Well, that was the floor plan of all the buildings up at Sheridan
Oh,
at one
okay.
time.
That's the
You
ground.
can see the railroad track running
Okay.
down between the buildings
Okay.
there. Yeah,
Okay, so at one point in time,
there was no date on that, but
no.
it had to be early, very early 1900s, I'd say.
Okay, we see the Sheridan machinery. We see a lot of TW and CB, and a lot of Harris and Harris Graphics and Harris Intertype nameplates. And off camera, it was mentioned that no Sheridan Ironworks nameplate here.
You know, the TW and CB Sheridan nameplate was used at that time. That's why there's no Sheridan Ironwork.
Okay, so
I have to correct myself.
Okay.
Nice pictures up there,
Okay.
TW and CB.
All right. We're gonna let Judy relocate. Okay, you got a picture on the wall
Of course,
there.
that's
Who's that fella?
That's all for breeding.
Alfred
Whoop.
Greenberg.
Okay, well, he's got a big glare in front of him. We're gonna have to relocate to get him too. This is one of the Mr. Greenbergs. This is Alfred.
Alfred.
Now, I seem to remember the name Oscar Greenberg.
Oscar was plant manager when I first went to work there. And I think, I'm not sure if that was a brother or not.
There was an Alfred and a Victor. I think Alfred and Victor were brothers. I think Victor was Oscar's father, I think. I'm not sure.
So that'd be Oscar,
That'd be
uncle.
Uncle.
Yeah.
Any idea where Bob Greenberg would fit in there?
Bob was Oscar's son.
Oscar's son?
Yeah.
Bob Greenberg had a hardware store down here in Champlain. He died a couple of years ago.
Right. He also worked the shop for a while.
Did he?
Yeah.
And he was our first county legislator when we went to the new,
Yeah, I think so.
new system. He became our first county legislator. And he was, when he hung it up, it was replaced by Larry Paquette, Celine Paquette's husband. So,
Mhm.
and then following him was John Zerlo, son of Jack Zerlo.
You all right?
So,
Oh,
a lot of Harris involvement there.
Hulda Greenberg, who worked in engineering, was Oscar's sister.
Okay.
And they had another sister, Mabel. Mabel Woods was a sister.
Well, you know your Greenbergs.
Well, I know a few of them.
He's older than I am.
Why am I thinking Greenberg's also involved with the ski factories?
They were.
They
That
were.
was
Yeah. It was Victor Henry, or
Hendrick Greenberg.
it was a Greenberg. yes.
Yeah, I'm sure Bill LaBelle.
They owned and operated.
Yeah.
I'm sure Bill LaBelle told us many times, but
Yes.
I've forgotten.
Yeah.
But, okay, so the Greenbergs were very prominent as far as
Very- Yeah,
community.
Yes.
influential in the community, yeah.
Yeah, and another name occurred to me when I was thinking of the Greenbergs here. Another family name is Lavoie. That was very important to this company too. That had a lot of Lavoies over the years.
Yes, over the years, they were mostly assemblers, and all of them were chief assemblers. They all had their specialty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's start with that first fellow in the corner there. That's right. Yeah, right in that corner. Do we know which one of the family he is? Let's see if we can zoom in on his name down below. You have to get real close. Bear with us, folks. Here. That's okay. That'd be middle name is Lockwood. Legrand Lockwood Clark.
Legrand Clark was the early Clark, one of the very early Clark family that got involved with the Sheridan. You know the connection between Sheridan and Clark?
Now, the next three pictures are all Sheridans, I think. Well, I'll have Robbie Clark here back at another
I'm
time.
not sure, but he might have been the one that married one of the Sheridan's daughters.
And one of them was
That's
Lockwood's
the
uncle,
Clarks.
I think. One of those Clarks was
All
Lockwood's
the
uncle.
Clarks got involved.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so move to the next guy. Next guy is a Sheridan. And next guy is a Sheridan. You know all these people, Lee? These your photos?
No, I've never seen these
Those there?
photos before.
Okay, I think Robbie Clark brought some of those down. But the one, the Sheridan founder, that's your picture? Lee?
No, none of those are mine.
One of those, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's, but he sounds like he's the founder, and I think it has an 1836 date on the bottom there, so it's probably Bernard, or, so he was one of the people responsible for us standing here right now.
I don't know the background of the Sheridans, other than the fact that their family got involved with the Clarks through marriage. From there on, I'm lost.
Okay, well, I'll let Robbie Clark fill us in on that.
Yes.
So that's-
Yeah, he's the
That's his
man.
family. Okay, let's find another angle. Okay, Judy is zooming in right now on a pattern. This was the first thing that Al Strack made when he started in the pattern shop back in 1949.
Well, close to it. I'm sure they were patterned before I made one, but,
So you made patterns like that then?
I made many patterns like that, yes.
Some of them are quite huge.
So,
In fact, the pattern for that's
Yes.
considerably bigger.
oh, for the
There's some-
shared nameplate on the side there, yeah.
In fact, Lucky Clark's got one that's huge.
Okay, you can zoom up. I got some little photo albums and such on the table. Are those little colorful booklets? Any idea what those are? Any of you guys bring those?
I think those are
Almost look like a credit union type of
are they
bank.
union books, Al? or-
They're union agreements.
Union
Yeah.
agreements. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So the
After a contract was negotiated and successfully, every member got a little handbook.
and if somebody was doing something he didn't think, he'd look it up in his handbook and say, "Oops, you don't have to put up with that."
Well, in later years, the contract got a lot more complicated,
little bit
so
longer.
they didn't put out the booklets.
They
But
weren't carried around in their shirt pocket.
initially, the contracts are pretty simple, easy to understand.
Yeah, you work 40 hours, and here's what you get paid.
Yes.
And one thing that that union never seemed to get, and I've always felt bad for them. They never seemed to have any much of a sick days in their contracts.
I always put it in when they came to the negotiating table, but they always gave it up for something else that they felt was more important.
Yeah, but it just seemed strange. I never felt guilty taking a sick day, but I just
No-
felt.
Nobody was ever denied a sick day.
But they wouldn't get paid for it.
They didn't get paid for it, right.
Yeah.
Sick days are really nothing more than a vacation day for most industry right now.
Yeah. I mean,
And that was a general attitude, so they often gave it up for either more vacation or one of the many benefits that were negotiated.
but once in a while, you really are sick, you know.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to convince the boss of that there, but once in a while, you really are sick.
But most of the insurance policies also had a clause in it to pay for sick time if it's any extended time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. But that,
that was a way of covering it.
yeah. Okay, can you zoom in on that little embossed thing there? Tell us where you got that, Lee, that nice colorful little picture of looks like somebody in a foundry.
Dick Hawks had this hanging on his wall in his office.
And who's Dick Hawks?
Dick Hawks was lead engineer in the department. He spent most of his time in eastern Pennsylvania.
Okay.
His dad was Blair Hawks, and I believe this was Blair Hawks' piece when he was still active. And he gave it to Dick, and when Dick left the company, he said, "Here, take this. It's your turn to watch this."
You became the keeper of the flame.
And it was in an old frame, and I took it out of the frame, and behind the frame was Alfred Greenberg's picture. So
Alfred Greenberg
he
was sitting
came
there for
with
years
that,
saying,
yeah.
"Let me out of here."
Yeah. So
Okay.
now it's here at Celine's.
Okay, and there's
Yeah.
some more pictures and stuff. Al, I'm gonna have to move if you could, so Judy can see this last little table here. Hopefully she won't get too much of a glare. And again, more of this display. This display will be here through October, through November of some time. Not sure when, how long into November. We're doing this on the 16th of August. I know some folks are both of you guys gonna be here tomorrow during the Champlain 25th anniversary, 225th anniversary to answer questions?
I'll be here for part of the day.
Okay, Al?
I hadn't even heard about it, but I will be.
Okay.
I expect there'll be a pretty good turnout.
Well, there'll be a lot of traffic, but there's so much going on that the phone company event starts at 9 o'clock, and that's up the hill. Then you got a dedication next to St. Mary's Church of a roadside historic marker. That's at 11. You got a band playing up at the phone company thing. Then at noon, band's playing from 11 to 1. And at noon, you've got the Champlain Village Fest starting right across the street here. And there's free ice cream. And I think Greg Martin, the mayor, told me that the Papa John's Pizza is also going to be providing some free food there, so that ought to be popular. Then at 4 o'clock, you got all the activities starting up the road, so there'll be a lot of traffic. But other people will have time to stop in here. I hope you guys get some traffic. So this is a very, very nice display. And Al, you were part of a group. I think there were probably 6 or 8 of us that sat around a table up in Bob Morgan gave us the conference room, I think, and
Yes.
talked about
We got a little bit more specifics, not as much history. We talked about machines at that time and the likes of that.
Yeah, I think we got almost 4 hours worth of footage that day, so we put it.
I'd like to point out one thing.
Fire
A
away.
little while ago, I talked about Zerlo
Spacer.
spacer. That's it right there.
Okay, can you zoom in on that, Judy? Can you see that little the green and white booklet here? The Jack Zerlo Spacer. It's called the Sheridan Spacer.
It's called a Sheridan spacer, and actually our sales force put it on their list of things to sell.
Now, obviously, when you work for a company, you can't say I developed this at home at night.
I don't know what that arrangement was.
You never developed anything at home at night. Everything you did at Lee was company property, I imagine, even though you might have changed a few things and thought of something unique.
As far as patents were concerned, if you came up with anything, it went to your superior. And
Your boss got credit.
I'm not sure where it went from there.
But you got your name on the patent, but you didn't get much cash in the pocket, eh?
You have to sign the corner of the blueprint. Okay, I'm going to probably close out this portion. Before you guys leave, I've got a book full of pictures I'd like you guys to look at for my own purposes here and just to identify some machines. I got a book full of pictures of Sheridan items that recently purchased. But I want to thank you guys for taking time out on this Friday afternoon
Glad to do it.
to chat with us.
Happy to do it.
Harris graphics is fading, and, memory of Harris graphic is fading, so
Oh, yeah.
it's good to be remembered once in a while.
It's 25 years now.
26.
Well, maybe 26 years.
26
Yeah.
years. Yeah, so,
So,
yeah, it's a lifetime for a lot of people, 26 years. So.
It was the lifeblood of the village at one time, yes.
Yeah, obviously for the whole town outside, you had agriculture outside of the village, but for as far as village employment, people in the village, it
Yeah.
helped raise a lot of families and provide food for a whole lot of folks over the years. And it's unfortunate, but we lost Harris in 1987, and now we're in the process of closing out the final remnants of Harris in Rouse's Point. And it's unfortunate, but time marches on, and we don't know what's, we can't sit back and take anything for granted.
yeah, nothing's forever.
We lived through some good years. We're not sure what the future
sure
holds.
did.
Okay, anything else before Judy hits that off button?
Nothing that I've got.
That's it.
All right, we've been talking with Al Strack and with Mr. Lee Gordon, and we appreciate them taking all this time, and we appreciate Celine Paquette for putting up this display so that people throughout the area can take advantage of it. And while we're ready to close this out, this is a picture that I believe was over the desk of Al Strack for many years. It shows the old former railroad, the Rutland, going by Sheridan on Elm Street in Champlain. There are the offices, and you can't see it there because it's no longer there, but there was a little spur that came off and went between the buildings, and you left the offices and went over to the plant side of the operations, the machine shop. Machine shop is to our left in this picture, and the assembly floor is behind that Sheridan sign. As I said, the offices are way over here to the left. When you left there, you were going across the tracks, either way, one direction or the other. So this is our look at the Sheridan Company, and this picture was taken in the early 1960s. At that point in time, Elm Street was still a main road. This was Route 11. It took you into Rouse's Point. So Route 11 went right through the village and tied up with Route 9, which also went through the village, and there was no north way. So it was a very, very busy area in downtown Champlain. So that's it from Champlain on this August 16th, 2013. Thanks for watching, and for those of you who understand that this kind of programming is important, and those who help support our continuing efforts. And we'll close out with a look on the Foundry area.